It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday, I'm going to address a thing I've seen circulating for a while in various permutations. The idea that, and I've seen, people more on, the anti-progress side complaining about this. I've seen people on the more progressive side going, yeah, that's right, deal with it. And it's just not true. The idea that men have to work harder to get a woman interested in them now than in their father, grandfather, or, uncle's, older brother's time. And it's because women have money now and don't need men for financial security. You can see how I feel about this idea. Okay, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron so I can have my own money. Patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. And a lot of this is, well, it's partially research driven, but partially the stuff I've learned through Leanna Care sessions from clients about what the actual impediments are to meeting people and dating and finding the right person. And let's just pump the brakes on this idea that women have money now, so they don't need men for financial security. That's what second wave feminism in the 1970s was about. Women went out to work during World War II. And then, they were temporarily pushed back into the home by propaganda because they wanted, the jobs to be there for the men coming back from the front, right? But okay, that was the 50s. So women were working in the 40s. And then they were pushing to work in the 60s. And I grew up in a single parent household where my mother worked. I was born in the late 70s. So the 80s and 90s, people worked in past generations. And that just, the fact that it's just historically ridiculous that all of a sudden the world changed that way for, I guess this is targeted at late millennials, Gen Z. But even before that, there was only a brief period of time in history, a couple brief periods of time where there was a skewed male to female ratio because so many men had been killed in wars. But even then, men were at war. They'd seen some shit. They paid their dues to society. Right? The idea that there was ever a halcyon time where men just had women falling at their feet for financial reasons is just nuts. And I wish progressive men would stop saying that because it's the wrong message. The reality is that the things that really interest women are not, yes, there's finances, but when you could raise a family on a blue collar middle class job, well, it was a much more equal playing field, at least if you were white, right? Black America got pretty fucked during that period. And that's another thing, this idea that it was the same for everybody is just false as well. And there are problems in certain countries, China's one-child policy that you can only have one kid. Well, they want a boy. Yeah, that caused problems. But the people that are saying this are not in China, right? We know that in places like Japan, where the hours it takes to prepare the really elaborate lunches and do all the housework and everything like that, which is still overwhelmingly done by women, and then women work. Yes, a lot of women are choosing to not get married just because of the extra workload, not because of anything to do with, there being a particular problem with men having to work harder. It's, you know, the paradigms, the paradigms, the expectations have not caught up to realities. It's not about money, it's about time and energy. But there's more. A lot of the people that are saying these things get their views on the world from nerd media, comic books, video games, you know, the TV shows adapted based on them. And an issue I've always had with comics as of, you know, I mean, we went through that really, really crazy hypersexualized period in the 90s because of AIDS, where everything went kind of bizarre, and we had things like the Man Show with the juggy girls and girls bouncing on trampolines and stuff like that. And at that period, nerd media shifted from what it had been in the golden age and silver age of comics to something very different that was more like the, you know, Robert Heinlein hot and cold running secretaries sci-fi thing. That I'm not bashing Robert Heinlein. It's just that's the root of it. Now, I mean, Heinlein was writing when there was this amazing thing started called the birth control pill. And so there was the free love movement. Now that didn't really get going for most people until 1970, even though, you know, the birth control pill was invented in the 50s, because the U.S. Supreme Court only allowed it for married people, only allowed the birth control pill for married people. It was only until, well, the Supreme Court in Griswold ruled that, in 1965, ruled that unmarried people, sorry, that was married couples. It wasn't until Title 10, the Public Health Service Act, Title 10, allowed low cost, low income individuals to access family planning services, but there was a reason it was called family planning. Birth control for unmarried people wasn't legalized in the United States until 1972. And so then there was this boom, right? That's what caused it. But that wasn't people getting married. That was the hookup culture of its day, right? They called it free love at the time. And, you know, free love came at the cost of things like syphilis and chlamydia and you know, so on and so forth. And then, you know, AIDS happened and that all changed. And anybody that thinks that intimate relationships were easy in the era of HIV clearly didn't live through it, because holy shit, that was some pressure, let me tell you. You know, I was involved in those efforts to educate people on safe sex, and that's when, you know, sex ed and talking about it and communicating and figuring out what you wanted before you got into, you know, a sexual relationship with another person, which meant knowing your own body. All these uncomfortable conversations had to be had with the backdrop of, you're sexualizing children. Let children keep their innocence. You're encouraging them to have sex if you do sex education. All that was going on back then. It's just, everything's just coming back at the same time right now. But like I said, if we look to nerd media, we see in the golden and silver age, before things went kind of crazy in you know, that post-Watchmen, post-crisis, speculator market, everything being very shocking, big splash page period, you look at a bunch of stories where the main character, the superhero, I'm talking Spider-Man, I'm talking Superman, you know, they had to work to get the girl. And that was a relatable thing back in the 40s when Superman came up, and the 60s and 70s when the Silver Age, when Marvel was building. This is not a new thing. The people have to wait a while to get the girl. The messaging, the expectations are just different. And I was talking to a few people over the weekend, a few women who are just women are done. Women are fed up with all the noise. And this is the problem with the men calling out other men thing, that when they get it wrong, it's way wrong. And then it's, you don't speak for us, shut up, that's not what's going on. And this is a real issue, because the problem is men do listen to other men more than they listen to women. And a lot of guys don't believe that, but it's true. You know, one of the very common topics of conversation among women I know in fandom right now is how frustrating it is that the freaking out over She-Hulk is still happening. There's an example of a show that is for women. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean men can't enjoy it. It means that it is done with a female frame of reference, and so women's interpretations are probably more accurate in terms of intent than men's are. The same way, you know, in a ton of superhero media that's told from the male point of view, we just sort of have to take guys' word for it that they're not talking about us when they're cheering on a character saying "Mewling Quim" or "I invoke the right of prima nocte" as a joke. It's not real. They didn't mean it. Oh, he's the bad guy. Gamora's a whore, literally. No, she's not. But oh, that was just, well, it's not real. Star-Lord forgets a woman in the cargo hold of his ship. Her. Oh, well, that's the beginning of his journey. He has to grow up. Ding, ding, ding. But when it's a woman, oh no, she has to be perfect. Out of the jump. And women are watching this. And women are going, what the fuck? And the number of times that I have heard, we understand it's stinging because we've been there with this other stuff. We understand why guys feel stung. I think attacked is the wrong word, because the stuff lands differently with women than it does men. And the problem is that men will never be convinced that this is how women are seeing it, and that is probably more likely the intended message, because that's the intended audience, because it's told from the point of view of a very particular type of woman. But no. And I've heard multiple women say, we understand why they're upset. We don't understand why they're this upset. And quite frankly, women don't care anymore. That's the problem. And if you look at, you know, even the 90s, even as late as the 90s, there was that more sensitive man thing in the 70s, but there was still this idea of take it like a man. That this kind of freaking out, rightly or wrongly, never would have washed in any previous generation. Guys would have been checked by other guys. Come on, don't be a, misogynist slur of your choice. Now, we watch it on the message boards and on Twitter, guys encouraging other guys to lose their shit. And the first thing any woman does is check someone's social media. I mean, a lot of people meet online these days. So if you're losing it that badly, if you're just completely going to pieces for weeks over, what is it, 6 episodes, maybe 7 of a half-hour comedy, what message do you think that's sending? And this is not intended to mock individual men. Did you hear what I'm saying? I am not mocking or attacking individual men. Let's wait for someone in the comments to say, yes, she is, right? Because I'm just lying somehow. Why would I do that? It would make no sense. If I wanted to actually attack men, I would just do it. I do it on occasion. Not all men, but like individuals. But it's the messaging. It's that comics sort of pivoted from having to work to get the girl who had to be persuaded because it's a one-way trip. You know, in the 40s, you didn't get divorced very often. You know, domestic abuse was a private matter. So, you know, they called it playing hard to get, right? Men had to work. That was the same paradigm with Peter Parker and Spider-Man. And then it shifted into the she's out of your league, Pete. You know, she's out of your league, Peter thing. But it was a Batman comic where I finally went, this has gone way too far. I remember it was during the Hush run. And Batman and Catwoman were making out in a sewer. It was a Hunting Killer Croc or something like that. But I'm like, they're making out in a freaking sewer. It literally smells like shit down there. And it's all hormones all the time. Like, what? And I said at the time, like, okay, Batman's nuts. Like, maybe, okay, I can buy it from him. But her? Like, what's she getting out of that? And that is, you know, as much as people say, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real, it's not real. You consume this stuff, the same type of stuff, the same paradigm over and over and over and over again. And all your friends consume this paradigm over and over and over again. It does set your expectation. And you have to be careful with wish fulfillment in that regard. You know, is the wish you're fulfilling healthy? And the only person who can do that is you, right? You're the only person who can be honest with yourself about whether that type of person that you idealize is because this is a person you'd actually build a meaningful relationship with, or just it stokes your ego. Because one of the things they don't tell you about hot women is that tends to come with a lot of maintenance. Not just to maintain that look, which is very expensive and very high maintenance. But emotionally, psychologically, in terms of expectations, it's a lot. And so this idea that, you know, this is something that is about a connection with a person instead of, you know, a woman turning her body into the equivalent of a Ferrari, you know, that status symbol, ridiculous luxury item. And I love my performance cars, don't get me wrong, but yeah, they're silly. That's why they're cool. You know, the engineering's awesome and some of it trickles down into regular cars, but yeah, you're throwing money at just stupid cool, right? And that's what women do to their bodies. And that's where you get this, phenomenally attractive women. I mean, it's all surgery now, is the thing. And that hits women too. Like, there's a feeling with women that it's getting harder and harder and scarier and scarier. And I mean, I do think the way Me Too was handled is probably the root of this. It's not women having money. It's that people are afraid to approach each other because women are terrified of being assaulted and men are terrified of being falsely accused, or in some cases, accurately accused. And then we get into the whole creepy thing. And the creepy thing always existed, but it's the threshold is definitely lowered. But then, the threshold, men call women crazy at the drop of a hat now. And the weird thing is guys thirst after Harley Quinn and then throw that around as an insult. And women are sitting back going, yep, red flags, next. And that's the thing. I think people forget when you're talking on public Twitter or you're talking on public Facebook, people can see you. And so, that locker room talk, which was never a good thing. Now, for whatever reason, people do it in the open and not realize that people can see you and people judge, and people would have judged that way, way back, right? Way back. And the truth is that the social expectation to get married went both ways. I mean, if you read, and this is the important thing about reading originals of things, right? Like, go read the original Sherlock Holmes. Go read Silver Age Spider-Man. Go read the early Superman strips, right? Like, read them because you see what it was at the time, not the evolutions it's gotten up to present day. And Sherlock Holmes, the big deal was he was a confirmed bachelor, because during that period, bachelordom was this lifestyle that was seen as a bit odd but newly accepted. Men who just didn't want to get married because they weren't necessarily interested in having children. They weren't concerned with passing on their legacy, which was odd, but that complementarian view of the world mixed in that era with a higher tolerance for eccentricity. And then everybody kind of nudge wink knew a whole bunch of gay stuff was going on behind closed doors anyway. And as long as no one found out in public, all right, but don't make it public. And right now we are just learning a lot more about each other because of social media, and it's freaking people out. And that's why you guys know I always say it's very important to properly diagnose the problem. And it ain't that women have money. It ain't. I mean, right now it's freaking COVID, man. Like, I don't know why that got lost. Everybody's social stuff, everything, took a hard reset. I used to do dinner parties regularly, at least 4 times a year for like 30 people. Now, other than my own mother, I can count on one hand how many people I've had over to my house that weren't a contractor, right? That's how much it's changed. We're still not out of it. And so I wish people would stop throwing stupid shit in the air. Like, women have their own money now, so men have to try harder. Men don't have to try any harder than they ever did. But those things that men did back in the day are eroding. I mean, I see some older people going, don't people go on dates anymore? This hooking up thing. I'm not a fan of hookup culture. Hookup sex is bad sex. It is. If you don't have communication, if you're not at least friends, it's and when there's alcohol involved, it's not good sex. If you need to lower your inhibitions through chemicals, maybe you're doing it for the wrong reasons, just saying. And I keep hearing people saying, I don't have time to date because they're busy and they're tired. Well, all right. That's a fair choice. But that isn't that anybody has to work harder to date that person. It's that it's just not happening. It's not any other person. It's literally the person who doesn't want to date is exhausted. And the work school thing in the 20s is brutal. And then there's that whole stigma of dating in your 30s. So weird that everybody thinks there aren't that many people dating in their 30s when I keep hearing people complaining about dating in their 30s. Like, these are all mind traps. They're all coming at a problem with a negative attitude, and no wonder you're not getting good results. You're mentally and emotionally setting yourself up to fail instead of enjoying earning it. Talking to people just to talk to people. No expectation. Going up and talking to an attractive person is sort of fun no matter what. It's a nice little exchange. I like random conversations with people. That was something when I was in PTSD therapy. It was humiliating at first, but as I went on, they're like, just go out and talk to people. Just talk to strangers. Just talk to people. Conversations that have no weight to them. Just hi bye. Now, people who don't know much about Toronto, that's not done. People don't speak to each other. They look at you like you're crazy. So it was bad advice in that way. But, now I really like just paying someone a random compliment. Hey, I like your glasses. Something like that. Hair, glasses, it's safe because it's not below the neck. But, people are like, oh, if I did that, I'd get falsely accused. I'd be the... They don't know who you are to accuse you. Give me a fucking break. Like, that is just making excuses to not try. And if you're not trying, of course, you're not succeeding. You're not trying. The only guarantee that you will not find someone is if you don't try. And then there's other attitudinal, other situations, like other things. Like if you're looking to get a girlfriend, it's not going to go that well because what do you want? What are you looking for? What are you looking for? The individual person, love is about making a connection with an individual, not you suit my purposes to my boudoir, come on. And what's interesting is that I think is the mistake that Jen Walters makes with the dating app on She-Hulk is she wasn't getting any matches as Jen. And so they make her profile with She-Hulk and they calibrated everything in the profile for numbers, quantity over quality. And so she ended up with a bunch of douchebags because of course she did. That's what the profile was calibrated to attract. That is not an attack on men. That is an attack on men. That is an attack on Jen Walters and Nikki's poor decision. Instead of waiting for someone who would like her for her, even though that took longer, she went for the easy, 100 matches, 100 swipe rights, whatever. All they're doing is going for the status fuck. It's just like groupies used to do with rock singers. They talk about balance of power, but, in those cases, back in the day, like with 70s rock, even in the 80s, it was being able to say you slept with a famous rock star, right? It wasn't just one way. There was no mind control going, ooh, in some cases it was inappropriate, but, and I mean, fuck Jake and Hoggard. Glad he's going to jail. But, most of those encounters were sort of mutually using each other. You get out what you put in. And there are so many tools now to meet people. There are so many, meet up and this and that. And yes, you do have to work on your social skills. And yes, you do have to listen to feedback. And, if you want girls to like you, maybe don't freak out about media that happens to be for women. Maybe play it cool. I remember when I was, a teenager, it was be cool, be cool, be cool. Just be cool. Be cool. Like, don't freak out about stuff. Seem like you can handle it. That makes sense, right? And that doesn't mean that the people who are upset about things don't have legitimate feelings, that wasn't their legitimate reaction. Again, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it is possible for something to sting and you're like, okay, that stings, but I'm not going to react. And that's the thing. I notice a lot of people in their rush to freak out are missing the cues from the people around them that they are stinging everybody else because they're stung. And yeah, you're never going to get someone to want to be alone with you when you're doing that. Or when you seem so nervous and so uncomfortable in your own skin. And yes, I do believe there are things that have happened in the world, even pre-COVID, that have made people in their 20s and early 30s less comfortable in their own skin. I do believe there's the way social media is used does have a role to play there. Not social media itself, the way it's used, the way people engage with it. And a bunch of other things. I think that scholastic pressures start too early. I think things are just too competitive. And I think too many jobs that actually don't require college degrees are asking for them, which means, too many people, there are just too many people who want degrees and not enough slots. So, at the top schools. And everybody thinks that if they don't do the absolute best and they're not in the like top 5 percentile, they're going to end up with nothing. All that is contributing much more to people not connecting, and you can't fall in love with another person in a healthy way until you at least like yourself. It's not going to be perfect. Everybody's a work in progress. This idea that you have to have everything figured out by 30 is just ridiculous. Okay? You don't. Nobody does. But you gotta like yourself, and you gotta be comfortable with yourself, and you gotta be able to name some things you're good at and you like. Because the people that are right for you, they're gonna like those things too. They're not gonna see them as negatives. You can't spend all your time changing to suit other people. You've got to take a good hard look in the mirror, go, what in my gut feels right? What in my gut do I know I really need to do better at? And then be gentle enough with yourself that you can admit mistakes and improve, instead of being so terrified of making a mistake, thinking it's just such a life ender that you handle it badly and burn a lot of bridges. That's the basics of this stuff. And people get really nasty whenever I give this advice and say, oh, it's basically the equivalent of stick to sports. You sound like somebody's, dowager aunt and stuff like that. All right, don't take the advice. That's fine. I think we see the problem with that person, because women notice how men treat other women. And I talked to a couple of guys I know who are gay, and they say the same thing. Like, oh yeah, they notice how you treat waiters. They notice how you treat other people. They notice. And that matters. So you can't just suddenly put on an act when you're in the presence of the person who, let's face it, these people, it's all about getting them into bed. It's not about a relationship. And that's might be the issue, that what you're calibrating towards, the advice you're taking is wrong for the outcome you want. Think about it. But it's not that women are no longer forced to date men for sustenance. That's ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. You can put that aside. It's wrong on so many levels. Okay? Hopefully that sets a few minds at ease. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching. Manly Mondays.